Hello and welcome. Today I'm joined by Scott Hardy, the founder of Top Class Actions, Legify Law, and Trimaxion. Scott has built a unique ecosystem of three interconnected companies that handle everything from consumer outreach to litigation finance and direct legal counsel. We're going to discuss how he smashed through a multi-year revenue plateau by obtaining one of the first ABS licenses in Arizona to own his own law firm. And we will also dive into how Scott is using AI agents to manage tens of thousands of monthly leads without inflating his headcount. Scott, welcome to the Growth Page.
Thank you, Alex. Great to see you.
Now, most entrepreneurs I know, they usually stick around with just one company at a time. You have a trifecta. So what led to this situation you have right now?
Well, naturally, it was necessity. And it's funny when I was just reading an article about like 83% of companies never making it to 5 or 10 million a year in revenue. And now we've got 3 of them. But it really was necessity. I started Top Class Actions just trying to connect consumers to lawsuits and settlements. And then not knowing what business model, I thought I was going to get paid to advertise settlements. And then I sold one settlement that first year and went, oh man, I'm a failure, right? This isn't going to work. But it was my side gig. And so I could just continue my day job in cloud computing and figure it out. And so then one day at a class action conference, an attorney said to me, Scott, I don't need class action claimants. I need potential plaintiffs. Can you find those for me? And the entrepreneur in me went, yes, absolutely. No problem. I can get right on that. And I turned around and went, oh man, how am I going to do that? But we launched class action investigations and that worked. And all of a sudden we started making revenue where an attorney would say, hey, I've got this case in mind and I need the plaintiffs. And back then, Top Class Actions only had 30, 40,000 people a month on the website, but that was enough to get the cases off the ground and just kept on doing that. And then we were plateauing around $5-6 million a year in revenue profitably because I bootstrapped the business. You know, the only outside funding I got initially was 60 grand from my father-in-law. And that turned out to be a really good investment for him because he got 10% of the company. But I just kept iterating the business. So we had class action investigations, running marketing for these lawyers ethically, and it worked. But that $5-6 million a year, I was trying different marketing, trying different things, added mass torts, which are the drug and medical device lawsuits people see on TV. Our big case right now is social media harm, where our law firm suing Meta and YouTube and TikTok and Snapchat, and just couldn't get past it. And then Arizona changed the rules to allow non-attorneys to own a law firm, the ABS system that was started in the UK. And I was one of the first ones in line, spent a year preparing, got approved, and we started referring out and co-counseling with all of these clients that used to be clients, and then they became co-counsel partners. So that way we would have a much bigger impact working with the clients that are signed, and of course would then be able to take a share of the attorney's fees. And that's what then allowed us to go long-term, blow out, 10 million a year in revenue and see the potential for 50, 60 long-term. And so, but it was just necessity starting the law firm. And then 2 years ago, I had a litigation funder that had said, Scott, yeah, we're up for, sending you 25 million to focus on these blocks of cases. And I went, great. Hired another lawyer, hired another paralegal, was looking at scaling up the firm dramatically. And then I see them a month later, they're like, you know what? We don't know if we like the cases. And I'm like, if you like the cases, what do you mean? I mean, you saw the paperwork, you saw the case theory. What do you not like about the cases? Okay, honestly, we didn't even look at it. What, are you kidding me? I hired people based on the handshake. So that was when I went, you know what? I can do this myself. And so I had tried to figure out the way to start a litigation finance arm to allow accredited investors to invest in these mass litigation cases and give the average accredited investor the opportunity. Because up to that point, if you wanted to invest in mass torts or mass actions, you had to send $1 million, maybe if you got lucky, a $500,000 minimum away to a massive fund, like a Parabellum of the world. And that wasn't an easy way to get into it. And then I figured out the way to do it. So then I started talking to some friends in private equity, and my good friend who started off with 1% equity in the first company and 1% in the second company. And now he's got a bigger chunk in the third company because he's a big venture capital PE guy, established entrepreneur. And we started Trimaxion. And so then launched our first fund. And a buddy of mine, very good friend of mine, just happened to have sold one of his companies. And he said, "So what are you doing, Scott?" And I told him, "Oh, we got our first fund. We're focused on toxic baby formula that was killing premature babies. And, there's already been multiple 8-figure judgments against the defendants. So we're going to do that." And he goes, "Great. Here's $1 million. What? That's it?" And naturally, it wasn't it. There were a bunch of phone calls and people talking to his money people, but that's what really launched our first fund. Now, that case, there was literally just another 8-figure verdict against the defendants. I think the average settlement the average number was $15 million per client for that case. So that case is going well. We launched our second fund, which was focused on video game addiction. That is going very well. We expect to return capital to our investors in that one by the end of the year. And so that'll actually might be less than 2 years for the fund to return capital to the investors. And then we have our third fund, which is social media harm. And that's getting all the press right now, where we're suing Meta, YouTube, TikTok for addiction and all the other harms that mostly young women are getting hammered. With our video game addiction lawsuits, they're mostly young men. With our social media harm cases, they're mostly young women. And it's body dysmorphia, severe depression requiring hospitalization and therapy, suicide attempts, drug addiction, sexual assaults. And they're very severe cases. And, there was just a $6 million verdict in that case in LA. And it's funny, I just had an interview with a reporter from Law 360 yesterday.
Right.
And she said, "I saw ads to sue Meta on Facebook. How are they allowing it?" And I said, "I'm surprised as well. But I mean, they're making tens of millions of dollars a month off of it. But of course, one client could cost them $10 million. So I don't know why they're doing it." And it just came out today that Meta is no longer allowing people to advertise, attorneys to advertise, to sue them, which I wouldn't want to put an ad on Top Class Actions saying someone wants to sue me, so I get it. But that's a long answer, Alex, about how I started these 3 companies and where we're going. And as you know, entrepreneurship is hard. When I started Legify Law and I moved all these cases from selling them to being co-counseled, where I'm deferring out 100% of that revenue and I'm eating all the marketing expenses myself, which is all through TCA, I went from having 1 profitable company to 2 money-losing companies for multiple years. And so that was extremely painful, but it gives you that focus of, all right, how do I cut costs? How do I don't want to go out and try to raise a bunch of money for my law firm. How can I bootstrap this? And now both companies are cash flow positive and profitable. So that's good. But man, it was doggone hard for the last couple of years.
Not a straight line journey, and I'm sure when you were at it, it was quite challenging as well.
Yes.
I think maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your decision making when you're in the early days and you're building it. How do you find out when you should pivot and do something differently and when you should just persist? Because you mentioned early on there was a period when it didn't seem to be working as well as you wanted to. So how did you decide that, no, I need to stick with this and I need to fine tune it, or we need to pivot, we need to do something else entirely?
Well, I think I was an AOLer back in the 90s, America Online. That was the internet for tens of millions of people before broadband became widely available. I was personally on the internet, before anyone else knew about it. I was a hacker back in the late 80s and 90s with a mobile modem. And so I've been a tech guy and wanting to be a tech entrepreneur for many years. And I saw how Steve Case at AOL, I took all these little tidbits out when I started Top Class Actions. And so like the very first thing I did when I started Top Class Actions, I focused on organic growth because I couldn't afford to compete with the lawyers that were advertising lawsuits. And I started an email newsletter. And my first newsletter had 28 friends and family on it. And now we've got 600,000 subscribers on it that we send emails 5 days a week, another 1 million people in a database that we do targeted emails to that have all opted in for different private lawsuit campaigns. But I just kept iterating. And so when I first started it, I said, I know that people want to know about these easy to claim class action settlements that they qualify for. I know it. And so I put it up and traffic started coming, but I wasn't making money. And then I sold that first settlement and I went, man, maybe this is good, but I should be making more money. I should be making more money than just AdSense revenue from Google. And then I just persisted. I, just like every entrepreneur or many, I maxed out my credit cards. I had a home equity line of credit and that was $100,000. And I used my vacation time from my day job to attend these conferences until I just, it's persistence until I met a lawyer who said, can you find me potential plaintiffs? And that's what launched the business. But the revenue still did this, because if you're a class action lawyer here in the United States, you might say, hey, Scott, there's a problem with the latest iPhone with the antenna. And I need to find someone who has a bad iPhone. And this is a great iPhone. I'm not saying anything disparaging about Apple. Find me a plaintiff for it. And so we'd put it up, we'd get you your potential plaintiffs, and then you'd be gone for 3 to 6 months until you wanted to file your next case. And so that's why our revenue did that. And then a buddy of mine, Greg, called me. He wasn't a buddy then. He was just an advertising lawyer. And he said, hey, Scott, you get into these mass torts? And I said, I tried doing that before, but I didn't have enough traffic on the website. I only had 30,000 people a month then. Now I've got 60,000 people a month. Tell you what, I'll do it for free for the next month. And if it works out, great, we'll work out a rate. If not, no harm, no foul, hope you get some free clients. And he said, sure thing, buddy. Let's do mesothelioma and asbestos cancer. And let's do actose bladder cancer and vaginal mesh and a couple other cases. And we did it. And I went back to writing all my content again because I couldn't afford to pay the writers to do this experiment of mine. So I wrote all the content for the first month and it worked. And he said, great, I'm signing clients. And I doubled my monthly revenue. And the key part there is that a mass tort is one case, but it's filed individually by hundreds, if not many thousands of people. But they all have similar injuries. While a class action is one case filed by one person, and the settlement goes to all of these people. And so since a class action is filed by one person and the settlement shared, one settlement shared by everybody, the individual payments typically are a lot less. While a mass tort is essentially a very similar case, but it's filed individually by thousands of people, and there's much more documentation required to participate. The individual payments are much more. Now, the average American thinks that the mass tort lawsuit they see on TV is a class action. And so they would search for actose bladder cancer class action, and they'd come to us. And so that was allowing us to continue to grow that traffic organically. And we doubled our monthly revenue. Then we doubled again the next month. And all of a sudden, I had a viable business. And it just so happened I had been fired from my day job a few months prior. So the timing was exceptional.
It all worked out.
It did, but it was just not being afraid to iterate. And it always does help to have your back against the wall. And like my wife had said to me, she said, honey, I love you and I want to see Top Class Actions succeed. And we were sitting, this was back when I used to drink. We were sitting on the patio having a cocktail. And she said, but if this doesn't work out, she goes, I need to go back to work.
Hmm.
And my wife is awesome. She said, she's a speech pathologist. And she goes, I'll go back to work. You stay focused on top class actions. I'm like, no. Just give me one more month to figure it out. And that's when all of that came together. And if not, I would have probably gone back into cloud computing. And that's the big thing, is if I hadn't have been fired and I hadn't been backed into that corner to make the company work, it was paying for, nice cars and vacations. But I might not have been forced to make that iteration that blew the whole company up and then resulted in 2 more companies, right? Mm-hmm. So losing my ability to support myself ended up being a blessing in disguise, though it was, once again, very, very, very difficult for a number of months.
Certainly. And I think the perspective when you're in it and when you have some distance from it, it could change significantly. It's interesting how you also mentioned later the period when you hit the plateau of revenue of 5 to 6 million, because for smaller law firm owners, if that's the revenue and if it's profitable, that could look like success. And they might not have a drive to start new businesses, to go from profitable company to starting new ventures that for some time are not profitable. So once you start getting some traction, how did you restate your goals and what success looked like for you at that moment to keep pushing yourself to go further?
Well, I've always had big dreams. And it's funny, like when I was back after I started the law firm again, and I was back to going, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay my people this month? You have those times where you go, what was I thinking? I had top class actions here. It was peeling off $1 million a year in profit plus. So what's wrong with me? Why couldn't I just be happy with that? Mm-hmm. But in my mind, I'm always, I think like a lot of competitors, I'm very, very competitive. A lot of entrepreneurs are very competitive. And I want to do better. And I had a nice house, I had a nice car, and a great family. But I wanted to have a business that would scale to hopefully 100 million plus. And I know that in our industry, there are companies that do it. So what's stopping me? And I'm a .com guy. I did well at AOL and I spent all my money. And then I did well when I went to a company called Nextel Partners. Mm-hmm. And I spent all that money. So then in my mind, I'm like, I know that there's a way to start a company that I own that can scale. And it's funny, I almost sold top class actions and Legify Law like a year and a half into the law firm. And then I was actually ready to sign the paperwork. And it would have put single digit millions of dollars in my pocket. Probably, the number was an 8-figure number, mm-hmm. But realistically guaranteed cash in pocket was just high 7 figures. And then of course you had the earnout, but there's no guarantee for an earnout. And now, especially have the hindsight, I would have really gotten screwed on the earnout because it just lasted 2 years. And so then I would have had 2 years where we still weren't making money. Mm-hmm. And then now, like this year, like end of year 4, year 5, whoa, the money just skyrockets. And I think it's just not being satisfied with the status quo, knowing that I can do better. And thank you, Lord, that the company that was going to acquire us dragged their feet on the acquisition, because I was ready to sign it in April. I was ready to sign it in May. And then they just kept dragging their feet. And I didn't know it at the time, but that private equity group was going through a massive financial problem, and they didn't communicate that with me. They just said, oh no, everything's fine. It's just our lawyers are busy. And then when I said, hey guys, I'm walking unless you give me the paperwork by the end of the week, then magically their lawyers get freed up, and they free up the cash. But at that point I was so frustrated with them. And my beautiful bride had said to me, she's like, do you really want to work for those guys? Because sure, you've got an earnout, but you're working for them. And if they're jerks now, how are you going to be able to last through your earnout? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. And so I had a moment of epiphany where I just knew this was a terrible deal for me and to not take it, thank God. So now we've seen that growth, but it is just that not settling, just believing in yourself, right? I mean, that's the thing is they say being an entrepreneur is getting punched in the gut 5 times at least every day by some news, something happens. Oh my gosh. And you go to bed and you're sore, but you're, oh my gosh, but you're beat up. But then you got to wake up the next day going, all right, let's do it all again today. Today is going to be fantastic. And having that drive to do it and that belief in yourself that you can do it, even when you're down on your luck. And like when I was literally going, I don't know, I'm going to pay my people this month. I got to figure it out. And then I'm paying, you figure it out and everybody gets paid, but you don't get paid. And then like over the past 2 years, I personally racked up $1 million in debt. That's personal. It's not on business. And so then how it takes a huge amount of intestinal fortitude to make it through that and not give up. But you just have to believe that there's a way to come out of it. And if you surround yourself with people that are supporting you and you've got a good business in the end, you'll work your way out and make it through. But man, it's hard. Does that answer your question, Alex? Sorry.
It does. It's very helpful. Thank you, Scott. I think another takeaway from the way you've described it as well, one for me is the timeline. Like you said, the revenue wasn't a straightforward line in any direction. It's always ups and downs, and you need to see it through. But then also having that entrepreneurial spirit that even if you get punched multiple times a day, you just bring the same enthusiasm tomorrow and you keep going. What I see in many lawyers that are really good at what they do is they try to turn away from the business side of law and just focus on practicing law. And because of that, because they don't have maybe whether it's inherent or they don't want to spend on the entrepreneurial skills required, their business is suffering, but maybe they're not growing as fast as they actually want, even though they might not admit it directly. What do you think would be your advice to somebody who wants to practice law, but they don't have the same entrepreneurial drive, for them to think about running operations differently? So maybe they bring somebody who can take care of that, seeing the timeline differently, seeing what needs to be done a little bit differently than just purely focusing on the.
I think it's one of the things that I had to do as well, is that as an early stage entrepreneur, I was just like, if it breaks, we'll fix it. You do everything yourself. But then when I needed a scale, I brought in a chief operating officer who happened to be a very good friend of mine from my Nextel partner days. A guy named Steve Williams. He's awesome. He's an operator. He says, Scott, you're the creative guy. You're the cheerleader for the company. You've got all that energy. He says, let me run the operations. Let me be the no guy. And he tells me no. But I tell lawyers who are willing to listen the same thing. If you can bring in a chief operating officer, then you're going to really help scale your business. And you have to be able to trust that person, and you have to have a very good relationship with that person. They have to be comfortable giving you honest feedback and telling you no, saying this is a bad idea. But it's really key because there are amazing litigators out there. But just like you said, they're great litigators, but they just haven't been able to get their business growing. And if they had a business partner there, then they can really scale it. And that's where the ABS model really helps, is you're allowed to go ahead and bring in non-attorneys to run the business and own the law firm. So you can have amazing litigators, and they can be compensated part of the attorney's fees. They can be compensated equity in the law firm. And so they're truly participating in the success. The latest thing that's come into the legal world has been in the healthcare world for forever, and that's managed services organizations. And so now you have law firms that are becoming MSOs. Rearview Law, which is a huge Arizona law firm, just brought in $125 million and made themselves into an MSO. So you have the law firm that actually provides legal services, which is its own legal entity here. But then usually 90% of the employees are part of the managed services organization. And so as an Arizona law firm, you're able to pay fees to the MSO by itself, but it separates things out. And MSOs are now popping up all over the country, even where there aren't ABSs. So that way it gives attorneys the ability to sell their business like a successful tech business as a multiple of profit. And before, it used to be impossible for attorneys to sell their companies. They'd have to sell it to their lawyer, and they're maybe going to get 3 or 4, if they're lucky, 5 times profit. But now with the MSO, where you can have private equity money come in and really, just like Rafi did, $125 million, then they can sell to a private equity group, bring additional capital in to help grow the business, and do it just like you said, Alex, as a business, ethically, legally, all that kind of good stuff.
Certainly. One of the things, Scott, that you mentioned earlier as well that I want to double click on is that when you were looking at your business model in the early days, you said that you saw bigger companies doing it, and well, if they can do it, then the model can be replicated. One of the things that my personal pet peeve is when we are talking to smaller business owners or smaller law firm owners, and when we talk about professionalization of the business, bring in somebody like chief operating officer, and they say, no, our business is different because, and they try to find those reasons. But if you want to grow your business, if you want to be a big law firm that's more like a big law, you need to have a certain structure in place. And chief operating officer is a big one. I think for me, and I wonder if you agree with it, having CIF is a big part of that as well, because a law firm might bill a lot, but then they actually not retaining any of that because of the expenses and how the firm is organized. And another one is actually having a dedicated marketing or business development function as well, not just a partner who has a part-time function of coming up with the marketing ideas.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to scale at all, you're going to have each of those. You're going to have a dedicated CFO. You're going to have a director of marketing or a VP of marketing. And you have to let those things go. And as the entrepreneur, it is super hard because we think we're right and we are running the business thinking we know what we're doing. But if you want to scale from single-digit millions to tens of millions and beyond, you have to bring in experts that are smarter than you in those pieces. No one knows more than me about my business at a high level. But my director of marketing, Sarah, she blows me away with her knowledge of in-depth SEO, in-depth marketing, reaching the clients, the social media aspect of it. What I knew and was the expert at 10 years ago has changed dramatically, as you can expect. So yes, bringing in the right people and trusting them and keeping people in the right seat. We run on the EOS operating system, Entrepreneur's Operating System. And having the right butt in the right seat is critically important. And like Sarah, she left Top Class Actions because I put her in the wrong seat. And she was like my very first employee, and then she worked her way up because she's just a badass. And put her in the wrong seat. I wasn't listening to her. And then she left for a few years. I call it her walkabout. And she worked for some massive Fortune 500 legal organizations. And then Steve, chief operating officer, happened to be in Portland, Oregon, and said, hey, I'm reaching out to Sarah, just gotta have lunch with her. See if she'll have lunch with me. And she did. And then he kind of went over with her everything that had changed in the organization. And then she came back. And she's amazing. It's funny. Yesterday, so we were one of the early adopters in AI, I would say. We developed an AI engine that wrote all of our 90% of our content. And that saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So everything was written by the AI, edited by a human. And that cost us about $500,000 to develop 2.5 years ago. Sarah just this week said, I just vibe coded an agent that's now writing all of our content. It took me just a couple of hours. Oh my gosh. And now she's been testing it and we're rolling it out. And, it's, you need people like Sarah. You need people like Steve that are independent. You trust them implicitly. They're creative. They're driven. And if you don't have those people, you won't scale. Same thing that we have a fractional CFO and who's also our CPA. And so having him allows us to really plan ahead.
For somebody that is still looking for their SR and for finding the right fit, what would your advice be in terms of how to find the right person that would be a good fit in terms of culture and also actually be good to the...
So I'm thinking of everyone who is on my executive team now. Each person was an introduction or part of my existing network. And so Sarah, she was the roommate of my friend Troy's girlfriend at the time.
Very straightforward.
It was just one of those things where I was sitting there in Troy's office. At that point, he was the founder and CEO of a class action settlement administrator called Simpluris. Don't tell my old employers, but I used to go ahead and have client meetings when I would fly out. So I'd go out for a meeting with my day job. And then at night or in the evenings, if I could, I'd fit in one or two TCA related meetings. I met Troy, and Troy had just finished me walking through his rabbit's warren of offices where he said, oh, this is where we mail out all the checks to people. And this is where our sales team sits. And then, oh, this is where we handle all the questions about settlements. And we sit down in Troy's office. And he goes, yeah, we're not a big deal like Top Class Actions is. I go, what are you talking about, Troy? I said, you have actual employees. He said, what do you mean? You've got like 8 people on your website. I said, yeah, those are all just fake pictures and fake people. It's all me. And he laughed. He's like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. I said, so Troy, don't second guess yourself. You are doing something awesome. And I said, now I'm finally at the point where I think I can hire a writer. And I think I'm making enough money on my Google AdSense money to pay the writer part-time to write some content. And that's when he said, oh, I've got this friend, Sarah, and she wrote for Forbes magazine and Condé Nast, and she went to the University of Arizona in Tucson. And I was like, what? She's a Wildcat? I grew up in Tucson. So that was how we got Sarah. And then Dieter, our director of IT, I worked with him at AOL. And I hadn't talked to him in like 10 years, but I put out on my personal network saying, look for somebody. And his wife said, hey, you should talk to Dieter again. And I was like, all right. Scott Seaman, our compliance lawyer, we had chatted with him for months at different conferences. And so, yeah, it's using your personal network to really find it. We've used recruiters, stuff like that. And for a leadership position, it's best if you're able to find somebody that you've got a relationship with. Same thing with Steve. Steve was at that point when he joined Top Class Actions, he was just acting as a contractor, just a hired gun coming into businesses and helping them kind of improve their businesses. And my wife was going out of town for a girls' trip. And I said, dude, you want to fly out here to Phoenix and just kind of spitball? We'll go to a concert, maybe go to a game or something. So he flew out and he goes, Scott, show me your scorecard. Scorecard? What's a scorecard? He goes, oh boy, get me a whiteboard. And so then we sat down and just, whiteboard out everything we should be tracking in the business that I wasn't tracking. Mm-hmm. And he came on as a contractor, and within 3 or 6 months, he was full-time.
Referrals go a long way for sure. And I think from my perspective, this is what some of the firm owners misunderstand. They think that it's either building the relationship or heavily advertising yourself online, but it's not one or the other. It's both. You have to do both. You can grow faster if you have a marketing machine, but at the same time, you still want to build a human connection. Because in your story, some things are 15 years in the making before you first meet the person and then you do something together.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the tale of Starbucks, right? I think that it was 12 years until they finally, expanded and blew up to becoming Starbucks. But yeah, you have to be consistent and take care of your clients. And that's something that we focus on with EOS is we have two different target markets for top class actions. Mm-hmm. We have our viewers that come to top class actions. We get 2 to 3 million viewers a month organically. We still get 1 million people a month from Google. And then the other 1 to 2 million come from social media and email. We spend $0 on paid marketing. Mm-hmm. Nothing. That's not true. Maybe like $1,000 a month, but it's literally nothing. Mm-hmm. And so we have our target market of our law firms that we work with, law firms and settlement administrators. And then we have our second target market, which are those viewers. Mm-hmm. And we have to take care of our consumers. We have to give them that personal connection. My email newsletter that goes out on Mondays has a letter from me in it. And I'm always just talking about me and my family. And then I include some business stuff in there, but create that personal connection with that reader. So it makes it less likely that they'll cancel and they care. And I've had law firm clients, so a top class actions client that's a law firm said, "Hey, Susie, our new client for this class action says hello." I'm like, "I don't know who Susie is." She said, "What are you talking about?" She talked about you, your dog Barkley, your wife Barbara, your kids Sydney and Aubrey. I said, "Oh, great. She reads a newsletter." And it's that personal connection to take care of those viewers. And it blows my mind when I talk to law firms that are signing up hundreds, if not thousands of clients a year, and they don't send out at least a monthly newsletter. That is not BS. That is not just sign up for our cases. That talks about what they're doing in the community and how they can help. So you've got to put out content that will help your reader. Don't pat yourself on the back for doing some charitable event. Give them news that they can use. And I'm sure that's your specialty, right?
That's a nice soundbite. I like it. But I think it's super important now more than ever because with AI, making it easier to publish the content that's faceless and it's not personal, firms that do begin to do something, they lean into it because it feels safe. But the opposite is actually true. If you continue with the faceless, there's no personal touch, then you're easily forgotten. But if you tell the story and you talk about your dog, your kids, your wife, the journeys you've taken, then your potential clients, whether it is other companies in B2B or if it's potential clients in B2C, they can relate to you and they reach out to you and they start building that connection.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's it. I mean, I've had lawyers walk up to me and go, "Wait, you're Scott Hardy from Top Class Actions?" "Yeah, that's me." Like, "Oh, I've been a newsletter subscriber for years. Oh my gosh, it's so great to meet you." And, it's such an advantage that you have when you continue to build that presence. And like, I wouldn't have this huge I had a big social media presence, but until I brought on some great people like Alyssa, who runs our social media side, she's the one that's created all these viral videos that come in and get millions of views. It's about having that trusted team, but connecting with your audience.
I think somebody right now that want to do something with technology might be staying by the sidelines because they think that technology changes so quickly that something like in your story would, cost you many hundreds of thousands of dollars, $500,000 to implement, that something now can be vibe coded in an afternoon. And because of that, they are not taking the first steps. They're waiting. Maybe it will get easier and easier, and potentially they're missing out in the process. You've seen everything from the early days of the internet to what is happening right now. What's your take on it? How should other firms that don't have somebody who's tech savvy look into the tools available and how they should approach this?
Well, I think if you've got an idea, now it's easier than ever to hop onto Grok or Gemini or ChatGPT and discuss with an agent your idea and say, "Hey, I've got this idea and this is what I'm thinking about doing. What are the competitors out there?" When I started Top Class Actions, I had to do it the hard way and Google everything. Now the barrier of entry is so low that you can see it and you can see if there are competitors out there, and it's okay if there are competitors out there. What are you going to do that's going to be different? When I started Top Class Actions, there was a website called Lawyers and Settlements. That was the big website out there. But they didn't write content that was focused on consumers. All of their content they wrote was really had a ton of legalese and was just focused on lawyers. So then there's me writing at essentially an 8th grade level, just keeping it really basic on all of our content, but very informative. Mm-hmm. And that's what differentiated me. And you just have to be passionate about your idea, because you're going to have people that are going to tell you you're an idiot. You're going to have people that aren't going to believe you. When I was driving around in my Pontiac Grand Am with topclassactions.com sticker on the back, because I couldn't afford to get it wrapped, I'm like, people like, that's stupid. That doesn't impact you at all. Mm-hmm. I had a friend that launched a website and they failed. You're going to hear it. And you just have to go ahead and know in your heart, in your mind, you're like, this is it. I can do it. And whatever you do, just don't freaking die. Don't let it die. Because it was so tempting when, after I launched the law firm, maybe I could just sell it and get a couple $1 million and, my family's taken care of. I know that I'll be safe, but man, I thought I could do so much more. And here we are, now we've got something that really is worth 9 figures. And you have to be, as an entrepreneur, if you have an idea, you have to be so passionate about it that you just will not quit. Otherwise it will die. Mm-hmm. And you have to be flexible, and don't be so narrow in your scope. Like when I launched saying, I'm just going to sell settlement advertising. Mm-hmm. If I just said, and then an attorney said, Scott, I want to advertise for plaintiffs. And I was like, if I went, no, I'm just doing settlements. That's it. Because I don't want to tick off the settlement administrators, then I'd be broke. I would have failed. It would have just been a side project. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to have the passion. You've got to be flexible. You've got to listen to your potential clients, listen to your viewers when they give you feedback. Our viewers right now are complaining about the level of ads on the website. Well, we're slowly taking off the ads. And by the end of next year, there will be 0 ads on the website that aren't our own law firm. Hmm. And so we're going to be pulling all of that out just to give it a much better experience for the viewer. Again, Alex, I'm sorry. That was a long answer to your question, but you've got to be so incredibly passionate about your business. And I had friends, just like you said, when I was at Limelight Networks and I launched Top Class Actions, and he had a business partner and he was doing a special events website, and they spent 2 years going back and forth on the coding. I said, dude, just launch. Just launch. You've got to just get it out there and then iterate. Just didn't do it.
As a marketers, we tell our partners all the time that it doesn't matter if it's my idea, client's idea. The only idea that matters is how the clients respond to it. So let's get it out there and then see how people respond, whether they like it, whether they don't like it. That's the feedback, the only feedback that matters. And it's interesting how you said about listening to the clients and also writing the content that's actually helpful and not making the writer sound smart and has a lot of legalese, but actually can be digested by the people that should be reading it. So there are a lot to be said about it. With the high volume of people coming to the website, with all the emails that you're writing as well, how do you manage the way you write and communicate for that volume so you're hearing everybody that touches your business?
Well, it's funny. I still see emails that come through just to the newsletter. That's going to get me a lot more emails now. But so people that slide through, I still see emails every week from consumers, from our viewers. Mm-hmm. I still ask the team for honest feedback. And our executive team does a really good job of staying open for their people and saying, hey, if you see something that needs to be fixed, bring it up. Because we're EOS, each department has their level 10 meeting every week. And any one of that team can create an issue that they're going to talk about. Mm-hmm. And so we encourage everyone, create an issue. If you see an opportunity, if you see a problem, if you see something that'd be really cool just to do, create an issue and talk about it. And because then you've got that pool of knowledge of everyone on your team that's discussing it. And there's someone else there that's going to have a great way to make it better. Or maybe it's a terrible idea and someone will poke holes in it. But maybe that will prompt someone to go, you know what, that doesn't work. But this modification of it would be, that'd be spectacular. So encouraging that communication from the employees at the individual contributors on up through management, senior management, executive team is huge.
Creating an environment where they can do it is super important. And too many firms either don't do it or do it in a very artificial way that doesn't actually contribute in a meaningful change.
You have to mean what you say. Everybody knows if you're full of poop. So if you don't mean what you say, and if you don't say, I'm going to deliver this and deliver on it, everyone's going to know you're full of poop, whether it's my viewers or whether it's the actioneers who I get to work with. They believe it, and they have to believe it with their heart, especially when your business has hard times, because it will. And then you're going to know whether your people believe in you or whether they're just going to leave.
That's right. In advertising, there's a famous quote by David Ogilvy in his sort of warning to some of the companies when they were writing the copy for the ads, is that don't treat consumer as if consumer is stupid. She's your wife. So yes, you need to make sure that you're being honest and you write what you mean. Scott, with all the experience when it comes to promoting multiple businesses that you're running, what would you say is the most underrated marketing channel for law firms to consider? What is maybe firms are putting too much trust in that they need to start shifting away from?
I think the average law firm needs to be directly engaged with all of their former clients that will listen to them. So email marketing is still greatly underutilized. All of them should be doing that. And they should be listening. The other thing is that they should be flexible in the cases that they're running. I had an interview with the Law 360 reporter, I think I mentioned to you, Rachel, and she's awesome. And she was talking about mass torts. And she said, do you find that mass tort attorneys jump in really early? Or do most attorneys wait? And I said, it surprises me if you have a successful personal injury attorney or a successful estate attorney, and they aren't looking at ways that they can monetize their existing clients, because it's not about just making more money, right? It's about helping people. And so whether you're an estate lawyer, a divorce lawyer, or a personal injury lawyer, you have an existing client database that you could sit there and say, hey, you know what? I think that these folks might have been affected by a spinal cord stimulator, or might have been affected by Roundup, or might have been affected by asbestos or talc, or now video game addiction or social. They might have kids, or their grandkids might be affected by this. And they don't, they could reach out to someone like me, and I would say, yeah, we'll co-counsel with you, and we'll help you with the marketing, or help, do an introduction, because they're missing out on these cases. And even if you're a successful mass tort attorney, sometimes they wait. They want to see until there's a Daubert ruling. Well, that could take 2 years or more. And during that 2 year, while you're waiting for this case to proceed, you could have put it on your website, re-engaged your email list, looked at your existing clients, and just done an engagement for all of those to see who qualifies for this case without spending $1 of marketing. And then you might, instead of someone else like me, that severe injury that's going to be $1 million case, you could have gotten it. So it's looking at their existing clients is just a greatly underutilized way to increase revenue and take care of your clients. Your clients should think of you as their lawyer. They should think of you, if you're their state attorney, if they see something online or on TV or whatever, they should ask you, hey, I took that drug and I got this type of cancer. What can I do? And then you should be able to go, you know what? I've got this great plaintiff lawyer I work with. They're going to take great care of you, and send them over so they get taken care of. You know that this is your client. They're going to have a good experience with that plaintiff lawyer. And then you're going to get a referral fee from it.
Certainly. More people should do it. It creates impact. It creates better relationship, a long-lasting relationship with the clients for sure. What do you think is the one thing that lawyers do that's overused and not as effective as it once was when it comes to growing in practice?
Social media advertising. It used to be, for a while, you had to go to, like, my buddy Jacob Mallerby, who started X Social, and now he's part of the mass tort. He had a lawsuit with X, and they settled that lawsuit. So now I know he's happy with the results of that. But you have a lot of lawyers who think that they can run their own advertising, and they just blow a ton of money on it. And they go, Scott, why am I going to spend 10 grand with you at Top Class Actions to find a potential plaintiff? I can spend $5,000 over here at Facebook and run my own ads. And that used to be the case, but you have a different experience. If someone's watching cat videos on Facebook or videos of their friends, they're not in the mindset that I want to hold a defendant accountable and file a lawsuit. If they're on Top Class Actions, they're there because they want to hold defendants accountable for their actions, and they want justice. So you have a very different potential client that you sign up on Top Class Actions than you would on social media. And so I think it's, for a law firm, they need to really think about how they're approaching their potential clients and what media they're using to attract them. Because that client that you get on Facebook, they might just think they're going to get paid. So they're just going to fill all the boxes and hit submit. Well, if you have someone go through that's highly engaged in the process, they're going to be much more likely to follow through if they've got the injury and file the case.
Not every lead is made equal. And I think a lot of lawyers that try to manage their advertising themselves, this is something they could benefit from understanding, because you might have a lot of cheap leads, but then if they don't become clients, if they don't become high value cases, then it doesn't matter. So something might take more of a capital to get started, but if it's actually producing better cases at a better rate, well, that's the path to be taking.
And especially for small law firms, because in a small law firm, they're talking to you or they're trying to run it themselves. Well, I mean, they probably bill $250 to $500 an hour. How does it make sense for you to run your own social media ad campaigns? Go to you, Alex, or go to somebody else to run that media. You might say, I just spent $5,000 on that. Yeah, and you lost 20 hours of work time. So you just lost tens of thousands of dollars when you could have just sent it to us, not worried about it, not lost any sleep about it, not done any monitoring, and be done.
And gotten the results.
Yeah, and got the results. It's just magic. You tell us what you want, we deliver the potential plaintiffs. That's the way it works. You don't have to lose any sleep on it at all.
For sure. Scott, is there a company number 4 in the works right now? What's the next big chapter for you?
I was going to start an intake. So I was looking at creating a call center. And then when you talk about waiting, I was chatting with Steve about it, because Steve's a business partner of mine. He started off as an employee and now he's a business partner in all 3 businesses. We said, with AI, do we want to go ahead and hire on 10, 20, 30 people in a traditional call center model? Or do we want to kind of wait and see what happens with AI assisted intake? And then I've got some friends that created some AI assisted intake, and I wasn't super impressed. We're doing, like, if you call into Legify Law directly, you're going to hit an AI agent that will get you to a real person. But we don't do any intake in-house. So that's still something that I'm looking to create and figure out the best way to do it. We'll probably do that next year. But at the same time, I don't know if I have it in me for a 4th company, And especially with Trimaxion being able to, it appears that our first, we're actually about to start the 4th fund. So that kind of scratches that itch, right? Because each fund is its own LLC.
Right.
and, is registered with the SEC, all that kind of good stuff. But that scratches the entrepreneurial itch for me. And then since it feeds the other two companies, I'm much less likely to start a fourth company. But the fourth company I've thought about starting has nothing to do with the legal field. It's all about cars.
Passion project.
Yeah, it's just be a passion project. And then I met with a friend who just did it. And he has dumped a few $1 million into it, and he's got no end in sight of losing money. So I'm like, all right, stay focused on the 3 companies, make sure they're all successful. And then eventually when, I sell the companies, which will happen in the next couple of years, most likely, then I can start my passion project and do a car related podcast and create the automated garage / entertainment center that I want to do for car enthusiasts. And there's no way I could properly deliver on that now anyways.
I think that would be something fun to look forward to in the future.
Yes, absolutely.
Scott, where can our listeners learn more about the work that you're doing personally and across your businesses online?
Best way is to go through Top Class Actions on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. If you are trying to get a hold of me and you're a law firm, LinkedIn can work. Of course, if you're a law firm and trying to get a hold of me, or a private equity investor or an angel investor, or someone who wants to invest in mass litigation, you can find ways to get a hold of me through Trimaxion.com, Legify.com, TopClassActions.com. My people will vet you. So that's a big thing. Is now it used to be very easy to get a hold of me, and now I've made it a little bit more challenging, just because of all the pitches and that kind of thing. But yeah, LinkedIn, our Top Class Actions LinkedIn is much more engaged. And if you are a professional trying to get, that's a great way to get a hold of me. Any of our team can track me down. Not that hard. Of course, I'll be at Mass Torts Made Perfect. I'll be at Perfect Law. I'll be at the AAJ conferences. So, and many of those I'm speaking at. Come and say hi.
We'll make sure to link some of them in the description. People will have some clues as to reach out.
Yes. But if you want to reach out to me, if you want to invest in litigation, definitely Trimaxion is a great way to go and reach out to us as long as you're an accredited investor. And then, yeah, it's exciting, and it's just so cool being in this business. I lucked out getting into legal business. I got so lucky being able to get into this business and work with such amazing people and go to such amazing places. It's super cool. And I love our clients. I love them. I love our viewers. I'm truly blessed, so I'm happy to be here. So thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you, Alex. I really appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Yeah, thanks for coming, Scott. It's been great chatting with you today, and thank you for your time and sharing your lessons.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Thanks, Alex.